So, hello everyone. Welcome to our lunch talk today. We have today a really nice topic. We will look on food forests, and we have very nice guests today in our lunch talk. Tomas Remiarz and Jennifer Schulz. And without further ado, I will start with some introducing slides, and then we will have both keynotes, and you can post questions, of course, in the chat, also during the keynotes. And then at the end, we have time to discuss the inputs. And I'm looking forward for interesting discussions today. So here you see the lunch talk series today goes towards food forests, and in the next slide, I will shortly introduce a bit our lunch talk series. Most of you already know this. They are they started with the Edible Cities Network project, and the Edible Cities Network is still existing, so feel free to join. There are a lot of resources that you can use. We have some other new projects also running on the same topic. There's the project on healthy and biodiverse edible cities, where we are integrating community gardens into the residential greeneries of cities in Germany. But there is also the Eco-Fabulanz project, which is more directed to the link between the urban and rural producers and consumers. And the next slide, I would like to show you a bit what is the common between these different projects. And also our speakers today I'm sure will give some experiences based on this. We focus on co-creation in our projects. Because we learn from the urban food initiatives that these solutions that these initiatives provide overcome the mismatch between the traditional nature-based solutions like parks, like residential green, and the citizens by deepening the social dimension of nature-based solutions. So these solutions are not like planned by landscape architects. They are co-created by the users themselves, and we have seen in the last 10, 20 years that the urban food initiatives are really successful in mainstreaming these co-creative practices. And they are socially inclusive. They invite citizens to co-create the sustainable development of their urban societies, to proactively change the urban environment to their benefit, and to induce also a paradigm of life style, especially if we look on food cultures, let's say. So these places are normally co-created with a large community of knowledge and practice. And this is also something that is relevant for food forests. Next slide. So food forests could be part of these edible city solution settings. So they are a form of urban farming, food production, distribution, and consumption initiatives. They combine also closed loop systems. We have a more sustainable water, nutrient, and waste management in these places. And of course, there was a positive impact on biodiversity and health. So, in this sense, food forests are part of these, let's say, solutions. They use also innovative principles of ecological design, of closed material and energy flows, and we can later discuss this in detail. Next slide. Yeah, EdicidNet can be visited by this webpage. You know this, and Stephanie already posted also the website in. You can use a lot of resources. You can meet the partners there and what we have achieved in this project. There are nice toolboxes. There's also material on business consulting if you want to make a business out of this. There are a lot of materials for exchange and education program. And part of this exchange, of course, are also these lunch talks. And today we will learn about food forests. So if we have the next slide, I would only show here. Here is the website. It looks like this, and there you can click there where the resources is marked, and there you can find a lot of interesting things. And next slide. Today, I have the pleasure first to introduce to you Tomas Remiarz. He has been designing, planting, maintaining, researching forest gardens for over 25 years, so one of the leaders in this area. He's working across UK and also across several other European countries with an emphasis on restoration of land and communities. He specialized in creating functional edible landscapes, and he's author of the book. You can see it, Forest Gardening in Practice. And today, Thomas will look at how forest gardens can help to build beneficial links between rural and urban areas and the role they play in land restoration and urban regeneration. So, Thomas, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Great. Thank you for introducing me and inviting me to this webinar. Let's start at the beginning because I expect not all of you are familiar with forest gardens to great depth. So I will explain what they are. So one word on terminology. Forest gardens and food forests are the two terms are often used interchangeably, both in practice and in research. Why that is and what that means, that may be something is something that we can pick up later in the discussion. At heart, forest gardens are multi-story cropping systems using ecosystem patterning to create functional, productive spaces. And they can consist of up to 7 vertical layers. That's where the forest analogy comes in. In the photo on the left, you see an example of a mature forest garden in Scotland. And on the right, I've tried to draw out and show the layers in different colors. So we've got up to 3 woody layers there, large trees, smaller trees, and shrubs. Then 2 herbaceous layers, including the ground cover, and then also roots and the vertical layer of climbing plants. And that allows for growing a wide range of crops, including fruits, herbs, vegetables, medicinals, and so on. And also included is a number of support plants for shelter, fertility, weed pest control, pollination, and so on. So these systems plants are generally arranged using ecosystem-derived patterns, which means they are largely self-supporting, rely on low external inputs, and produce increasingly impressive outputs over a long period of time. One thing to say is that understanding of the system really is key to success. So we can think of them as knowledge-intensive form of production. Next slide, please. In terms of how they work, the key word really is diversity, and we can think of diversity in several dimensions here. Structural diversity, we have looked at the vertical, but that can also express itself as patch diversity in the horizontal dimension. And then there is another whole level of that going on below ground in the root zone. Genetic diversity is expressed in using all 5 kingdoms of life to create a functional ecology. And in the plant kingdom specifically, look at family, species, and varieties diversity to improve resilience and system health. And then we've got functional diversity, both in terms of ecosystem functions, but also in terms of design functions of what yields and products we might get out of this. And finally, diversity over time, which includes both seasonal changes and longer-term cycles and trajectories. Speaking of diversity, next slide, please. In my view, there are many very good reasons to plant forest gardens. As I mentioned, we can produce multiple yields over long terms, and they are, as a concept, very adaptable to different to different scales and settings. This diagram highlights some of those. So in terms of production, we can produce more than just food. A whole range of other products is also possible, as well as a number of ecosystem services from supporting biodiversity, stabilizing local water cycles, carbon capture, and so on. On the other hand, a lot of social benefits for both individuals and communities can be embedded in creating and maintaining and using these forest gardens. Crucially, it's also possible to learn and develop a lot of skill sets that may help us weather the multiple crises of nature and society. So a lot can be done in these spaces. Next slide. So in the next few slides, I will show a few possibilities for food forests in urban areas. So we're starting at the very small scale, home gardens, where like household self-reliance can be built into the landscape. I'm showing an example of a 10 by 10 meter back garden in Lancaster, North England. And on this scale, of course, complete self-sufficiency is not realistic, but it's still possible to have a wide range of crops at all times of year. The 3 central photos are trying to give you a flavor of how the succession in the forest garden might look. So you've got like the start at the beginning on bottom left, and in the center you see like how the space looks like halfway through year 1. So you can see the ground is quickly covered, and then on the top right you have the mature system after only 6 years, and not just the canopy but also the dense ground layer, which you see in the other 2 pictures, which is really key to success and is another important niche for crop production. Next slide. On the neighborhood scale, we can also achieve a lot of social and ecological benefits as well as production of food. So they are often spaces where community cohesion, a sense of well-being, and improved quality of life for residents can be important factors in the design and creation and maintenance of these spaces. They can also be part of sustainable urban drainage schemes, as you see in this drawing, kind of landscape at village homes, where the water from the paths is channeled into pathways that feed the plantings in the area. Next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, we've jumped over one there. Sorry. Yeah, so looking at urban parks and other public spaces, here we can again enable access to food and green spaces for urban communities. So we're creating a greater potential for self-reliance as well as biodiversity, islands, and spaces where outdoor activities are possible. These kind of projects are often volunteer-led, usually with some level of local government support, which both enables and requires experimenting with new forms of governance in order to manage these areas in the long term, because it's for forest gardens, it's important to have a long-term perspective and build in not just a succession in the plant kingdom, but also in the realm of people and how groups evolve and interact. Next slide, please. I've been involved in developing forest gardens in a number of schools, colleges, universities, and in a way, these are ideal spaces to engage people of all ages in understanding ecology, learning to grow and care for plants, working together, and learning to take care of shared urban space. There is a scope for lifelong learning in forest gardens, also enabling reducing the nature deficit felt by many urban dwellers. So a huge level of opportunity. Next slide. Forest gardens also make excellent multiplier spaces, both for plants and for plant skills. Every forest garden produces surplus plants, and that is used in a number of nurseries and garden centers. Some run as non-profits, others commercially, and selling. Either setups can sell or share forest garden plants in a forest garden setting, which has benefits in terms of customers learning how to use these plants, creating a pleasant environment, also recreational opportunities on top of the commerce. So these sort of spaces can enable real intensive use of outdoor space in densely populated areas. Next slide. Scaling up and looking at the urban-rural edge, we can see people using market gardens where food forest plantings can provide infrastructure for shelter, wildlife refuge, and fertility banks, as well as being food-producing areas in themselves. Integrating perennials, trees, and shrubs helps to extend the growing season and the range of produce. And in terms of enabling forest gardens to be usable on that scale, it's very often people adopt linear or grid patterns, grid planting patterns to suit the need for effective maintenance and harvesting. And they often go along with innovative marketing concepts as well, such as community-supported agriculture or niche marketing of particular types of crops to particular clients. Next slide. So to summarize, we can say that food forests have great potential to shape our cities of the future. They exist and fit in at the intersection of several new approaches of how we conceptualize cities through urban planning, community governance, green space management. They are still at this point marginal and experimental, although we have proof of concepts, but they would benefit from greater support and more targeted research to maximize their benefits, which builds the bridge to Jennifer's presentation, which will introduce such a research project to you. Thank you very much. Final slide.
Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, what for amazing presentation and convincing approach. Yeah, I have already seen some comments in the chat. Maybe in between we switch to Jennifer. You could check a bit if there is something you could reply in the chat.
I will do that. Yeah.
I am happy to introduce Jennifer as our next speaker, and after the presentation of Jennifer, we will jump into the discussion. So please keep your questions for the discussion. I know Jennifer since long. We know each other since long. I was trying to remember something like at least 10 years ago, Jennifer. We met at a technical university, and this link is linked also to the biography of Jennifer. She studied landscape architecture at Technical University of Berlin. Then, after the study, she worked as landscape planner over 15 years. She specialized, of course, in edible forest gardens, but she has also an academic background. She did her PhD on restoration planning at the Technical University Munich. And yeah, after this experience and adventure, she developed the idea and assessed the feasibility of bringing forest gardens to cities. And since 2018, she leads the project Urban Forest Gardens at the University of Potsdam, nearby Berlin, where she and her team are researching ecological and social effects of these urban forest gardens in pilot projects. And well, there's a lot of evidence and practical knowledge now that Jennifer will share with us, and we are really happy to have you here. And yeah, the floor is yours. Thank you, Jennifer, for being with us here today.
Thanks a lot, Hina, for this kind introduction. And indeed, I remember you first time as a student of landscape architecture, I think even more than 20 years ago. I think you had a baby on your arm when you were a tutor. So I'm very happy and very pleased to be part of this really inspiring and important series you're taking care of since many years. And I'm happy Tomas already introduced the whole topic of forest gardens and introduced the whole field. So I will really narrow down on the urban context. And I want to start a little bit looking at the rationale where I started with about in 2017. I saw, coming back from many years in the countryside and abroad, that people in the cities I love urban gardening, but the big problem is many of those urban gardening initiatives are really temporary, like in not really ecological structures. Often they have to move. And there was a big demand of people and really a fight in many urban gardens in Germany to find ways of staying, of being long-term projects, of having rights to the land and all that. There was the Urban Gardening Manifest in 2017, which really inspired me because it was calling for a long-term rooting. And I thought then food forest would be something that really would enable something like establishing a permanent forest-like edible structure. And then with this really start creating social ecological synergies, because it's not only establishing a long-term ecological system, but as Thomas already mentioned, it's also really long-term learning, joint learning, communities that are building up around these gardens. And so I started with the question of how this could be taking place in cities, what would be the requirements and what are the challenges. And I think like one of the core challenges is really to find ways for long-term planning security of sites within cities and to develop, as for city governments or administrations, to give land to groups to find operational structures or like organizational structures that would be able to, in the long term, run those gardens. So just briefly, I think we heard all of that from Thomas already. I just want to really focus that there's such a big competition around green spaces. And I think what we find today, at least in German city planning, often there's a separation of functions. So on the one hand, you have nature protection, you have playgrounds, you have maybe urban gardens. Rarely have urban agriculture, like as a legislative form. But I think I will really stress that we have to find multifunctional solutions and create in those very dense green spaces a multifunctional solution. And I think a forest garden can really provide these different facets, not only in terms of urban edible productive system, but really in terms of climate adaptation, biodiversity, protection of soils, as well as a learning and nature experiential place. So what I started with in 2018, what Ina mentioned, was a trial and development project, sort of a feasibility study, where we sort of tried to discuss with all kinds of actors in cities where would it be able to introduce forest gardens, as well as many participatory projects around potential sites, discussing with citizens whether there would be a demand for it and who would be taking part under which conditions. So there was a 300 pages report. So anybody who's interested in developing an urban forest garden could have a look at the criteria and all that. Very technical, but I think we started to try to find ways to introduce that to not just only one place, but to find ways to scale it up. So the phase we're in now, the project we're in now, it's also a forest garden. It's called Urban Forest Garden as well. We started in 2021 with partners, which is an allotment garden association from Berlin. Freilandler Britz, it's an environmental education association, and the Department of Parks and Environment from the city of Kassel. And in this 6 years project phase, we have been able to develop three model sites, which on the one side, the really implementation is a goal, but as well, as Ina already mentioned, also research and trying to find out what are the benefits, are the effects, ecological, climatological, and social aspects of forest gardens. So just a brief introduction of those three forest gardens. So there's one in Berlin-Britz. As you see in the middle, it's always the picture before and then an advanced one. This is the one in Kassel-Walebach and the last one in Kassel-Helleböen. And the first two I will just introduce a little bit deeper. So Britz is from this site legislation. It's an allotment garden, and we created an allotment garden park on about 2.8 hectares of area, so quite a big forest garden. All of the gardens have been designed in a participatory way. This garden has been finished, let's say completed in a way, constructed in 2023, but it's just the kickoff development and the process. So whenever we can call it completed. Here we have about 150 participants. In Kassel-Walebach, it's a public green space about 6,000 square meters, which also has been, let's say, built or first planted in 2023. And here we have just about 10 core participants. And then there's the third one in Kassel-Helleböen, also on a public green space with about 8,000 square meters, completed in 2024. And here the core group are about 30 participants. So the first one in Berlin, in Britz, as Ina said, it's not about co-creating with landscape architects. This one has been a close collaboration in a participatory planning process with the people that are interested, but also together with planners, because in a public space, a food forest often has to comply with security regulations, infrastructure, and all that. So it's really helpful to think of it as a professional green space as well, where you can involve professionals in the planning approach. And that was really interesting, how to really find ways of bringing together all the desires, ideas, wishes, and knowledge, or even also lack of knowledge from people, but to bring it together with strategic planning and a lot of specific knowledge about plants, specifically from the planners. So just to give you an idea of these nearly 3 hectares of land, it's divided into a community food forest of 0.5 hectare. There's an environmental education area. Then we have about 1 hectare of a public forest garden park. And then there's about 1 hectare of allotments that are also designed and developed by the participants themselves into forest gardens. Just to give you an idea of the public space, where we planted about 400 trees, 2,000 shrubs, about 10,000 herbaceous plants. This is just into the community garden, and it contains about 100 woody species and about 100 different herbal species. Most of them are edible plants. The whole process was a long participatory process, first of motivating, creating a group, and then really going into the spatial design, where it was the moment the landscape architects came in. But then we went on not only from the planning, but really into the construction and building together. So what you see on the left is one of the first constructions with recycled materials, which is now like a gathering space even before planting, but it was one of the very nice starting points where people really felt proud of creating the garden. And I think a very good bridge between the still professional planning and the participation and taking over of the garden. So this is the joint planting. Sometimes there were 40, 50 people in those weekends when we planted, especially the shrubs in the herbal layer. I give you just a quick view. This is the way the terrain or the area looked like in 2022 in spring. Now my computer. Okay, this is in June. So we planted the first big trees, also with professional help. This is 2023 in May. This is 2023 in August, June 2024. And also in October 23. So what you see from a very pale grassland, in very short time, we have a very abundant green space, a very rich ecology, which settles in, and it's a really co-designed and a lively space with a lot of people taking care of. And I have not time to go into detail, but I think that's the most wonderful part of it, the development of the social side of things. In Kassel, the food forest or the forest garden is on an area of about 6,000 square meters in the public space, on a public land as well. And the project lead there is the City Department for Environment and Parks. This is the way the area looked like, which was also grassland mainly used for dog walking, and this is it now. So just here some impressions from the participatory planning. We have been together also with professional support, designing, building models, how these and visions of how this food forest would be looking like. And then as you can see now, if you look closely on this model, the plan that has been designed is really close to what people have wished for and what they came up in the whole model building workshops. So this garden was then built. It was planned and supported by Baumrausch, which are also permaculture background planners since a long time for forest gardens. And here we have about 86 species of woody plants with about 1,100 trees and shrubs planted and about 60 species of herbaceous plants planted, with about 3,500 plants. So some impressions. This was in April 22. This was then during the construction in April 23. You see how it looks like in August 23, already after the first vegetation period, and in June 25. So you see also here it has become a very diverse and abundant space in very short time. Just some looks inside, and the most important part also here, despite of a very small core group, it's a very active group taking care of the garden and really taking it as their own place to develop. So just a quick jump to what we are monitoring, because the model projects serve as areas for research and monitoring. So all the functions that we aim to find, we also try to find out how fast and how much of them are developing. So we're measuring the climate, microclimate in the gardens and outside. For comparisons, we're mapping the vegetation, especially the wild flora as well. Then also the fauna is surveyed, basically birds, bats, earthworms and insects, wild bees. We have soil monitoring repeated and all the time as well, socioeconomic surveys, how the community is developing, as well as how the knowledge transfer within the community is happening, and also to the neighborhood. And especially we're also trying to figure out in a participatory way how to monitor harvest and what is being used in terms of edible plants for nutrition. So I already mentioned part of the research is participatory, and I just give you some very quick insight of one topic, which is the monitoring of the diversity of plants. And that's basically it's not the planted plants, because we know them already. It's basically interesting to see what are the wild plants that are settling in. So you see, especially in Kassel-Walebach and Helleböen, a large increase in herbaceous as well as tree and shrub plants. In Britz, it's not that straightforward, because in Kassel and in those sites, we just took 10%, while in Britz, it was monitoring like wall to wall, and later just 10%. So the numbers are not right yet. But we can see a very strong species diversity increase by between 140 to 630%. And it's especially high in areas where the land use or the vegetation society has been poor, like on these dog walking areas, grasses. Also, this is accompanied by citizen science-based monitoring. So we use the app Ops Identify to make people participate in their discoveries, identifying plants, but then also recording them. So it's interesting not only in terms of how people find the plants and to record the plants, but also to see how many people participate in the monitoring. So in Britz, it's already 70 observers that regularly contribute. We have about 955 observations since 2022. In Kassel, we started in 23 with now 11 observers in Kassel-Walebach and 105 observations of 82 species. And in Helleböen, it's 25 observers, although the garden is just 1.5 year open, 89 observations and 123 species. Jumping to the topic of wild bees, wild bees, where we have really tremendous results. For example, in Berlin, after the year of planting, the first year the survey was taking part, Dr. Saure, who is the wild bee expert, he found 78 wild bee species, which is the second highest density of wild bee species found in Berlin in this size in just 1 year. And also in Kassel-Walebach and Kassel-Helleböen, we see an increase from 16 species which have been there found before the project was implemented to 48 after just 2 years. And in Kassel-Helleböen from 25 species and 22 before the project was implemented to 44 species. So of course, all these results are being analyzed in a very detailed way to see whether it's just generalists that are everywhere, but also to see whether there are specialist bees that are really requiring specific plants. And it's really interesting to find that in the short term, there's also parasitic species that need other species to be already established there to be coming in. And we always look at the connection between plants and animals, and it's important to stress, despite people in nature protection only think of endemic plants, that also here we're having a lot of those cultivating and also exotic plants that really serve as pollen and nectar delivering to local wild bees or endemic wild bees. So last part, I want to just give you a quick look inside is that we're trying to transfer the knowledge and the experiences we're gaining in the project into a network building within Germany. So we held about 5 nationwide networking workshops, and I saw already of the guests today, some of them are here. So last year we had a conference with over 100 participating people, also from administrations, but I was really happy to have 22 participating urban forest gardens that have been initiated in the meantime and that are dwelling and exchanging experiences and learning together on our networking events. We have been organizing a webinar series specifically for public administrations and try to systematically assess what is the knowledge needs for creating urban forest gardens to be able to transfer the knowledge we're gaining in those model projects. So we're right now in the final phase of developing a platform, a knowledge platform, which looks like this. It's going to be published in May, June. So trying to bring together all kinds of experience from practical sides to scientific sides within this whole knowledge platform. And we're happy for exchanges and people wanting to contribute to this. So as a conclusion, I can see and I can feel that urban inhabitants are reacting very positively and even enthusiastic about the idea of forest gardens. However, it's not just like a self-developing thing. It requires, I think, a considerable amount of knowledge. What Thomas already mentioned, it's a knowledge-intensive system, so it's really worthwhile to find ways of combining systematic planning with all the desires and ideas of people and openness for development. It's really important to have, I think, a person or a group of or an institution to be helping coordinating those processes. And I think it's interesting to look also on the city side where to place it so we can really find places to improve, like, for example, urban heat processes and adapt the forest garden to those requirements. The nice thing is through the requirement of the continuous learning through the dynamic process of the food forest development, these really stimulates a lot of communication, reflection, and joint learning. Fortunately, the German government opened a line of funding within the Aktionsprogramm Natürlicher Klimaschutz. I think Stephanie can put the link into the chat. And with this, cities can apply for funding to develop forest gardens and also for the professional support or for creating a post for people to coordinate those processes. So I thank you for your attention, and this is all work with a lot of brains and enthusiastic people helping in my team and a lot of people that have been helping to build those gardens. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Great projects, great effort, really impressive. And yeah, we have a lot of questions in the chat, so I will go through, and please, if you have more questions, use first the chat. So the main question after having seen all these nice evidence is also posed by somebody in the chat, is the question regarding the main barriers to establish forest gardens and maybe in urban areas and urban settings, but also in rural settings. Are there differences? And yeah, maybe we can start with this, because after such impressive evidence, there should be forest gardens everywhere, or?
Shall I make a start?
Yeah.
So I think one challenge is that it takes time, and it's not just, it doesn't just take time for those plants to grow. It's also takes time for this approach to filter through, because we've seen the first generation of forest gardens, so they are now mature. So we've got proof of concept. We've got some really great examples. We're seeing the second generation emerge, and like building on the shoulders of, they're standing on the shoulders of giants, so we all do. And so projects like Jennifer's, like benefit from the knowledge that those pioneers in the first generation have accumulated and shared. So one thing to say is that forest gardening is an incredibly generous community. So like if you meet somebody who's a forest gardener and you ask them a question, you probably they never stop talking. So it's a great collaborative effort, and it's very much grassroots. So there's been very, very little public money spent on this so far. And it's in research, in development, in creating these things, and so I think we might just be reaching the threshold point where, like, those sort of players are starting to get interested, and that might really accelerate the take-up of this approach. However, there's also risk involved in that it really has lived off the participatory approach in creating and maintaining these places. And I think it's a caution there is kind of not to lose that approach.
Okay, Jennifer, is this you were stating that it is important to have also people, public institutions or institutions behind this? How this is linked to this bottom-up success, let's say?
Yeah, I think it's really important to bring those things together, because the main problem of, let's say, groups trying to get areas, often they don't have the knowledge of the legal situations of the areas just to fight for the land and to get a contract for, let's say, 30, 40 years. It's a big challenge. And often they don't speak the language of the administrations. And then you have all these rules for areas, because if it's a public area, then you have to comply with security issues. As I said, if somebody breaks a bone, who's responsible. And there, maybe, I don't know if it's in the UK that's strict, but in Germany, public green spaces are very, very much regulated. And I think it's really, I'm a landscape architect by training. And I see one challenge is that most landscape architects, they are not interested and they're not learning about edible plants, for example, or even gardeners. They are learning how to garden, but they have never been in touch with edible plants. Maybe they have a garden themselves. We had the garden construction company, they were really saying, well, we never worked with those types of plants. What's this? What's that? How interesting. And there's really a lack of knowledge, not just like the basic potato and the apple tree, but how many species grow in our spheres that can be combined. And that's one challenge. And I think in terms of acceptability, it's still a challenge to make people understand that once the garden looks a bit more natural-like or wild, then it is really a place for biodiversity. Often people come and they say, well, it's not managed and it's not this and it doesn't look tidy and all that. There's still a lot of stereotypes that we are confronted with concerning how a green space has to look like. And if you look at the more wild it is, in the end, just like a general trend, the more biodiversity you find. And that's really an issue we have to communicate all the time. And bring people there and explain them, go to the garden, have a look. It's not just because it's just left behind, it's because it's on purpose. And that's really making part of the whole ecological regulation system. And that's something there has to be a mind shift. Also in landscape architects, not only in, people just passing by.
Okay, then I will go through the questions we have in the chat. They are related to the points you already mentioned. The first point goes to both of you. Is there a minimum size that makes a useful forest garden without being tokenistic? Is asking Iha. Is there knowledge about this, or what is a meaningful size, let's say?
Well, I mean, it's very much a question of what you're considering a useful effort, and I mean, I showed you that garden of my Jenny Laurel in Lancaster, and that's 10 by 10 meters, and she managed to really grow food all year, and some of those, um, and you can't grow all the apples you'll ever eat in a year on that scale. You can't grow all the food, but one thing that is really worth growing is herbs, perennial herbs, which are both high value, expensive, and easy to grow, actually, a lot of them. And a lot of them have not only food value, they also have medicinal value, so they're keeping you healthy. And they have all the pollinator benefits and so on. A lot of them are also quite attractive, so there's a whole range of edible alliums which you could grow all the way through the year, so there are many possibilities on the smaller scale as well. So yeah, Jennifer.
Is it more complicated if the space is small to manage the garden compared to a larger space?
Interesting question. I mean, it's very much, I think on a smaller scale, you've got actually more scope to pay attention to detail. So you can have more diversity per square meter if you want. On the larger scale, if you're going commercial or like large scale growing, then generally what happens is that that's planting patterns simplify. Like the species numbers probably like shrink in any particular patch, but you can still have a lot of different patches with different species combinations, so like it's but you have to adapt to the scale and setting really each time. Yeah.
And Jennifer, what is your point?
Well, we had quite a rigorous discussion with the Bundesamt für Federal Agency for Nature Protection when I started trying to get the funding for it and discussing what is a forest garden or what is it a specific type of an urban forest, how to define it again, like in this legislative frame. And then we came up with a number of 5,000 because there's an international definition of forest, which also applies to urban forest, which is 5,000 square meter. I would never take this like a harsh, rigid number. But I think in terms of what I said, a multifunctional space is also a small space. But when we want to have a climatic benefit in the neighborhood, if we really want to see like things that coming over above the edge effects that we find in ecology, really creating some sort of an inside ecological processes thing, that's something I would suggest to have a little bit bigger area, but it's a big challenge to get a big area like that in the city. I'm very aware of it, so I would say if it's embedded in a green corridor, for example, and it would be smaller, it makes a lot of sense to have small patches as well. Yeah. And of course, what we see, it's really difficult then, what you said, Thomas, to be able to pay attention to the detail. We have really difficulties with the groups managing the herbaceous layer when it gets too big. But then it's a question of the amount of people in relation to the garden, and especially the first years of bringing the system into, when you have grass coming up from the previous use, so you have a strong competition. So you need a lot of people. So it's always a question of how many people take care of in relation to the land.
Okay, this links me to the next question because we have many questions. So please, we have to be careful to at least discuss it to a certain point. There's the question from Maria. Do you see food forest as a realistic alternative for conventional or maybe also organic, classical organic agriculture? And is there, do you know examples where they used it as a business model? Thomas, you mentioned a market garden, so maybe we could have a look a bit on this dimension. Yeah. You already pushed in that permaculture is a type, of course, of also could be interpreted a bit like, as an element, let's say, in forest gardens.
Well, yeah, I did put something in the chat there. I think there's no answer to everything. Nothing is the answer to everything, but food forests and forest gardens can be part of the answer, of like part of creating a agroecological permaculture, like land use paradigm that will sooner or later have to replace the industrial agriculture paradigm that we're witnessing now the end of, because that is clearly unsustainable. So there's plenty of scope within that for forest gardens and food forests. I think, Jennifer mentioned like basically the use of forest gardens as infrastructure elements already, and that's, I think, in urban spaces, along waterways, along like railway corridors, along, and so on, in urban parks and so on. There's plenty of scope to include edible or other useful species, and just very quickly to come back to that, like minimum scale food, that's where like food forests, 5,000 square meters, 1 acre in Britain, roughly, give or take, sort of makes sense. If we're using forest garden as like name for the smaller spaces, then they can be anything from like 5 square meters. I mean, the smallest that I've come across in my research was 5 square meter beds, like at the front of somebody's house. It had 20 different species in it, and so they were harvesting from it. It's a valid effort for that household, So forest gardens on a smaller scale, food forests on a larger scale could completely change the face of our cities and sprawl into the countryside as agroforestry spaces.
Well, actually, my entry point was from the rural areas. I came back after 20 years abroad into the city, and I wrote my diploma thesis about how to regenerate land with small-scale farmers with some sort of, it was called successional agroforestry or syntropic agroforestry then, and how to see how you could use this as a really self-supplying way of delivering food to small-scale farmers and regenerate land. So my clients also had a business model where I had basically one strong basis is high value plants like medicinal plants or plants for special purposes like cosmetics and things like that. And there's a lot, and I think this can be like one pillar in a strategy of how to develop a business model around food forest, because it's very, very labor intensive, and so have to think of how to balance that with the market and the prices. This also requires a lot of specialist knowledge. So it's not every farmer that knows all the plants and like the qualities that are needed for the medicinal market, for example. This is one thing. And I think in the landscape scale, as Thomas also said, it's not like the one solution fits all. I think it could be part in a bigger mosaic. Let's say it's a very nature protective form of land use, and we can intensify. It's a form of agroforestry, and I think there's just a transition between just cropland and trees to something more complex. And I think we have to find ways which are still manageable for farmers, and where's the sweet point of complexity that can be managed while it still has the ecological benefits. And then I think there could be places that are very sensitive in terms of, let's say, erosion or whatever. You say there's the place for the real complex food forest, but then there could be other places that are less intense and really go into the topic of land use planning. I think there's a real chance to use forest gardens as a corridor, like in nature, or as part of a mosaic.
Okay, I will continue a bit with the questions now. We would like, maybe the questions go a bit more to the people that are part of the projects you have developed, researched, etc. So for example, there's the question from Lily regarding the participants in the Berlin group. If the people that have developed or co-created the forest gardens are those that are still gardening and taking care of the forest, the question behind this maybe is are the people more stable, the community more stable in a forest garden compared to a normal community garden? Do you have observed some patterns?
Well, I have absolutely observed some patterns. We have both. There are some people that have been around since the first ideas and the first like information campaigns and like feasibility workshops. They're part of the garden until now, but still there's a lot of fluctuation, especially there was Corona in the middle of it. So we still continued with the participatory process also online, which also cut on the possibility of people to really take part of it. It was a real challenge. And then you see different types of people's characteristics. Some are really curious about learning about a concept of planning, of thinking how to design a thing, of discussing, of group formatting, of creating like a framework. And then there's people that say, we just want to garden. I don't care about all the planning. Just let me take a shovel and plant a tree. So this is different types of people. And some people have both sides. And yeah, I don't know how, I guess it's very similar in other types of urban gardens. The nice thing, it's like this big assembly of different types of plants. I think it's also true for different types of people. So you just merge a lot of different talents together, a lot of different interests, and that's the beautiful thing. They can come together with different focuses, but still each one finds their role in the system. Yeah, I cannot give a general.
Yeah. There's the question linked a bit to this from Cooperative Underground, underground, I guess from Dutch. A beautiful project to Jennifer, actually. How many time is spent on maintenance and by whom? So a bit linked what you said and how it is financed. So on the long term, when your project will be over, then there will be no financial support. How do you see this perspective on a longer run, let's say?
Okay, so first of all, the financing was to initiate and build the projects was really with a big funding, and let's say I applied for a lot of funds because I said I want to really make it professional. And we spend, if we compare how much is the cost of a green space per square meter, it's about 200 euro per square meter in a normal green space. And we spend about 50 euros per square meters to put in place with professional planning and all that. I think that's quite an interesting number. So concerning the maintenance, the group has been trying and experimenting different formats. So, of course, first of all, everybody as a person is alone responsible whenever they want to contribute. So there's open gardening days, Wednesday, Thursdays, self-organized garden days. Still, we have one day which is like guided by a gardener from the project. And then there's like once in a month, like a group participation event, like 30, 40 people coming, and then really they discuss beforehand there's a smaller group that are discussing what are the requirements right now. So the observation of what's taking part or what's requiring in the discussion is really an important part of the management. It's not just going there and managing whatever, but really thinking of it. And it's challenging because nobody has ever done a forest garden before. So it's really learning to observe what are the challenges in this year. Maybe there are others in different years, especially the herbaceous layer. There's constantly changing. And yeah, so, and I think that really fosters the community building that people have to discuss and really be creative about how to find solutions. Yeah, I hope that answers a little bit of the question.
Yes, Thomas, it's your turn, but maybe you could integrate the next question so that we can cover a bit the others as well. How do you organize the community around the gardens? And there's also another technical question to Thomas. It's about preparing the ground, the land. Jennifer already mentioned some parts, and the use of permaculture principles. Maybe you could cover this a bit with, your answer to this.
Okay, so I mean that's yeah, I mean like in terms of the how to organize like as a forest garden project in an urban space. I mean there are different answers in different places. I mean I spotted, I mean as in here's Mike Pope, who runs a forest garden project in North Manchester, and he's doing it kind of basically. It's just a few people who really took the initiative and ran with it, like identified a space and populated it, and it's open to anybody, you know. So, but it's basically, and that's quite a common approach, you know, that kind of basically people just think this stuff makes sense. I'm just going to find a space and develop it. It's kind of a bit of the guerrilla gardening approach there. And that can be really effective, you know, so, and then those edible landscapes just appear, you know, so people like happen to walk through them. Great. I mean, as soon like as it gets more official, you know, in a public park or in urban like public green space, then kind of that conversations are to be had with officials, you know, so and then you need to be organized a bit more. And I've come across some groups, like there's a great group, Beacon Food Forest in Seattle, who have a very organized, like sociocratic approach to their organization, and have developed this whole 7-acre site in a park in Seattle. You know, so great. That is on the big scale, you know. So and then there are all sorts of other like more or less formal approaches in between that, you know. And I think one thing to say would be to I quite like using the ecological metaphors for like how people work together, you know, so like finding the niches for everybody who's got an interest, in offering niches for like different types of personalities, as like Jennifer explained, or different skill sets as well. You know, some people are really good at the social sharing and making a space for people, you know, so, and that is an incredibly useful skill set, because if you can attract people, then some of those will bring some of those plant skills, or, you know, design skills or project management skills, you know. And so just creating that polyculture of people as much as a polyculture of plants, you know.
This is nice. We have many questions. I see. Really, if you have some more minutes, then I would like to ask you some of them. And for those that have to leave the meeting, I'm sure that we will have another session on this topic. It's really interesting and a lot of questions. Thomas, how are rural agroforestry and agriculture and urban food forestry as movements connected? Have you seen interactions, synergies, and maybe later Jennifer has some reflection on Germany and this?
So the connection between agroforestry and forest and food forests is an interesting one. I mean, I think they're definitely fellow travelers, and there's like plenty of people who move between both worlds or move in both worlds. There's also, I think, agroforestry is like 10 or 20 years ahead of the game in terms of public acceptance, you know, and political acceptance. I think and that allows agroforestry to be adopted more widely. And I think the question now is kind of how could the same thing happen for food forests, you know? And some people would say that the best route might be to like define it as a form of agroforestry, and you know, kind of like bring it into that, but another approach would be to kind of identify it as like qualitatively different. But then kind of we're at an earlier stage in that progression towards kind of the mainstream acceptance, and so that in some ways, kind of, yeah, I mean, I'm torn which approach might be the more sensible one, because yeah, in terms of large scale models of forest gardens, we haven't got that many examples yet. And so there's still a lot to learn, but the best way of learning is planting a lot of the things and then observe, and so, yeah, don't know what you think, Jennifer.
Well, for me, it's very clear. A forest garden is an agroforestry system, very clear. I mean, coming from the tropics, the multi-story, multi-layer agroforestry systems are one of the oldest cultivating systems in human societies that have been found. But coming to the, let's say, temperate zones, I think it's more recent. There's no evidence of such a, like a complex systems in the cold or in the in the temperate zone. I think they're rather fields or crops with trees or like Bauerngarten. I don't know, like wild and diverse gardens, but not so much with the concept of multi-story. And this is, of course, because of the lack of light as a limitation for forest gardens in comparison to the tropics. And I think, as you said, Thomas, there's a lot of lack of research, and I think we are. And I'm particularly happy that I could be getting the funding for doing some research. The problem here is that we're not doing like repeated trials, but especially as the gardens have been designed very participatory, every garden is very different. So how to come up, with comparative results that are really showing the big trends, it's quite a challenge because that's a thing. And it's nice that each forest garden is very unique according to the place, but it is difficult if, for example, farmers or other people want to say, well, what's the productivity, how much carbon stored, and this and that, like hard numbers. And I think there's still a need for a lot of observation and research to, like, let's say, make it acceptable or show a range of different systems that could be beneficial in different terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say a little bit more on kind of like kind of a little bit of controversy with Jennifer there, that there are no models in temperate climates. I think, if you're looking at an English cottage garden, you've got fruit, vegetables, herbs, flowers, all mixed together, some annuals, a lot of perennials, a lot of woody plants as well. It's a temperate polyculture. It's a traditional temperate polyculture, and they do exist across the temperate world.
Mm-hmm.
However, because the main drive in much of the temperate world in recent centuries has been to expand and extend and simplify. We have lost a lot of the examples. We have lost a lot of the knowledge, and where some of that may still exist a bit wider is kind of North America, where North American traditional cultures. So I think we could learn a lot from that. Also in Asia, so actually in East Asian cuisine is full of perennial plants, and we really need to learn from other cultures, So I think Europe has lost a lot of knowledge.
Yes, I totally agree, Thomas. This is really, I have other examples now in mind, but yeah, I would say there are a lot of questions still unanswered, but people are leaving because we always have this 1 hour slot. If you agree, and in front of our audience, I would check with you out that we could maybe in June or something like this make another webinar on this, maybe on more practical things, how to do things. This would be really appreciated by the audience. So thank you very much for today. Inspiring, really nice examples, and I would be really happy to have you again here. You see, there are a lot of interesting questions in terms of learning, exchanging, etc. And Jennifer, we will of course share also your knowledge platform when this is open. Maybe this is also a good idea to make an appointment. I only want shortly to announce our next lunch talk before the people are leaving. There's another slide. Yes, we have it planned on the 24th of March. And the topic is a bit more health related, so more information will be available soon. I would like to thank you also the people behind this organization, Stephanie, Leo, for organizing in the background. Thank you for dear audience for visiting the lunch talk, for your questions. We will record also the chat and take also these examples that are in links, etc., and save this and make it available. The video will be also available on the YouTube channel, and please contact us. You can stay connected with us via the platform and also via the newsletter. And if you have a good idea for a nice talk or an inspiring initiative and you want to present this here within this year, so please contact us, and we will find, of course, a possibility also for you to exchange, because we have seen in the chat a lot of interesting initiatives with links that are really worth to be presented, of course. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Stephanie. And to the audience, it was really nice. And see you next time in March when the gardening season is starting. And yeah. And as you somehow promised that we will meet again in a webinar on this topic in this year. Thank you.
Thanks a lot too. Come visit.
It's been a pleasure to be here. And do get in touch, anybody, if you want to talk forest gardens via my website. I'm very happy to.
Same here.
Yeah, we have posted the website in the chat, and we will post it also under the video as well. Thank you all. Bye.